family in his hometown to get a telephone. They felt like they had finally arrived. It was a celebratory event for the whole family. Theirs was the last family to get a color TV. His friends actually threw the family a party over it. Jim's was the last family they knew of to get internet access. Jim was the last person he knew to get a cell phone. Yes, being late to the meeting and appointments and to church is second nature to Jim. But we're lucky because he is here on time for his speech tonight. Speaking on the topic of now the rest of the story, let's welcome Jim Kroshus.
Jay, the owner of an international steel manufacturing company, bluffed his way through life, became wealthy, and maybe shouldn't have. You see, Jay had a secret. Only his wife knew. Jay couldn't read a nursery rhyme. Until Ella Moss, a retired teacher, taught Jay Thiesens how to read. He was 55. Fellow Toastmasters, I was a loser. I failed the second grade. My best friend, Larry, in the whole wide world, wouldn't play with me anymore. No tears. I cried inside. Would I ever have another friend like Larry? Repeating second grade, old blue hair, Mrs. Douglas, slapped me across the face. Jimmy Kroshus, you're the stupidest boy I've ever met. I love school. It was my fault. I read my paper while erasing a mistake. In 4th grade, I failed again. They called me double flunky. In 6th grade, right in the middle of the year, the principal called me into his office. He said, Jimmy Kroshus, you're old as dirt. I'm moving you up to 7th grade today. At the end of the year, I failed again. Mrs. Douglas was right. A year later, I was 16 in the 8th grade. Don't feel sorry for me. Raise your hand if you got to drive your daddy's pickup to the 8th grade graduation. Number 1 here, baby. I felt special, sorta. I couldn't find a date. Mind your manners. All the girls were underage. The kids didn't call me flunky anymore. Some of them called me Mr. Kroshus. It's not funny. In high school, more of the same. I got kicked out of everything, spent endless hours in study hall, nothing to study. I love school. I was in over 40 fights. I hurt a lot of people. My junior year, the principal called me into his office. Kroshus, you're old as dirt. You will never graduate, at least not in this decade. Have you considered your patriotic duty? Novel idea. Call me impressionable. The next day, I joined the Navy. 3 months later, I got kicked out. I was afraid of the water. Returned home, got a job as an apprentice. Janitor. Mrs. Douglas, you were right. I didn't hit rock bottom, it's just where I lived. So I turned to addiction. A friend turned me on to addiction. Books, he said, will rearrange the landscape in your brain and begin to shape who you really are. I knew who I was, stupidest boy Mrs. Douglas ever met. Out of sheer boredom, I took his book home. 500 pages. Why'd I hate to read? Couldn't pronounce the words. Reading level 2nd grade. Comprehension about the same. 9 months later, I finished my first book. I couldn't tell you one thing about it. My friend said, read it again. 6 months. Read it again. 3 months. Slowly, as I learned to read, I began to comprehend. That which I so detested was now tolerable. Later, Other mentor friends came to my rescue. I started reading things I'd missed as a child. I read Mark Twain, Lewis, even some Tolstoy and Shakespeare later. I wrote poetry, a children's book for bullies because I hurt, and hurt so many. Books were an escape from a nightmare past to a future with dreams. I rafted the Mississippi with my new friends Tom and Finn. I harpooned a whale named Moby Dick, fought in the Revolution with General Washington, wept at the death of Abe Lincoln. I cut the rope that sent Captain Bligh afloat as we mutinied on the Bounty. I heard Captain Bligh appeal to his friend Fletcher Christian, "But you dangled me wee ones upon your knee." "Aye, Captain Bligh, sure I did. I'm in hell, sir. I'm in hell. Good day, Captain Bligh." Books were a time machine, a fantasy to the past, an escape to the future. Mrs. Douglas, you couldn't have been more wrong. You could have been my hero had you taught me to read. Yes, pain was motivation for my escape. Books, the vehicle. Tom and Huckleberry's daddy wrote, "The man who doesn't read has no advantage over the man who can't read." As a child, life consisted of nearly 40 hours of weekly TV propaganda. And then I met Andrew Ross. The smallest bookstore still contains more ideas than the entire history of television. So I cut the rope and said good day to you, Mr. BookTube. When you reread a classic, you do not see more in the book than you did before. You see more in you than there was before. Hear, hear, Clifton Fadiman. If there were an 11th commandment, I'm sure it would read, "Thou shalt read." I never had a dog. And then I read. Outside of a dog, a book is a man's best friend. Inside of a dog, it's too dark to read. My funny friend, Groucho Marx. As a broken-hearted second grader, I mourned. Would I ever have another friend like Larry? And then I met Charles Eliot. Books are the kindest of friends, and the most, are you listening, Mrs. Douglas? And the most patient of teachers. And oh, Mrs. Douglas, I didn't mind that blue hair one little bit, thought you ought to know. Recently, I spoke with my friend Jay Thiesens. I asked Jay how life had changed since learning to read. He said, illiteracy is bondage, reading, emancipation. I could wake up in the morning without fear because I could read. And now, you know the rest of the story.